The descent into the bunker had taken over an hour. Down into the belly of the earth, where the walls wept with condensation and the air tasted of stale copper and forgotten things. Dr. Aris Thorne was a man of science, a biologist specializing in extremophiles, but nothing in his extensive education had prepared him for the oppressive silence of Level 4. It was a sensory deprivation chamber cast in concrete, designed to withstand a nuclear holocaust, yet ironically, the true threat had grown from within. His assignment was simple enough on paper. Observe the subterranean ecosystem that had flourished in the deep geothermal vents near the bunker's lower levels. A specialized fungus, christened Cordyceps abyssalis, had begun to consume the inorganic material of the walls, breaking down concrete and steel with alarming efficiency. But the true horror was not what it did to the facility. It was what it was beginning to do to Aris. It started with a persistent itch, a tiny, maddening irritation on the back of his left hand. At first, he dismissed it as a reaction to the harsh chemical cleaners used in the decontamination process. He scratched at it until the skin broke, leaving a small, weeping sore that refused to heal. Instead of scabbing over, the wound began to extrude a thin, translucent filament. It looked like a thread of spun glass, but it pulsed with a faint, bioluminescent rhythm. Bunker's medical bay was a sterile white tomb. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, Aris examined the anomaly through a high-powered microscope. The cellular structure of the filament was not human. It wasn't even entirely terrestrial in its organization. It was an intricate lattice of silicates and organic proteins, an aggressive mimicry of his own biology. The realization should have driven him to the comms array to call for immediate medevac. Instead, a strange, creeping apathy settled over him. The filament was fascinating. It was beautiful. Days bled into a singular, dark continuum. The bunker's automated lighting cycles were the only indicator of passing time, but even they began to feel arbitrary. The itch spread. It migrated up his arm, settling in the crook of his elbow, then tracing the line of his brachial artery toward his chest. His reflection in the brushed steel mirrors of the washroom became a stranger. His eyes, once a clear, piercing gray, were clouded with tiny, thread-like structures that swam across his sclera like microscopic worms. The madness crept in not with a sudden break from reality, but with a slow, insidious erosion of his self. He found himself spending hours staring at the walls of Level 4, watching the slow, rhythmic pulse of the fungal mats that coated the concrete. He began to understand them, not in a scientific, analytical sense, but in a profound, empathetic communion. They were hungry. They were expanding. They were lonely. His left arm had become nearly useless. The skin was leathery, mottled with patches of pale, iridescent blue. Beneath the surface, he could see the filaments thickening, knotting together like a second skeleton. When he flexed his fingers, there was a terrible, wet tearing sound as the alien musculature fought against his own human tendons. The pain was excruciating, yet accompanied by an intoxicating euphoria. It was the pain of becoming something more. He stopped eating the nutrient rations. They tasted like ash and dust. Instead, he found himself drawn to the observation deck, where the largest concentration of the abyssalis thrived. He would stand there, his breath fogging the thick plexiglass, and press his mutated hand against the surface. The fungus on the other side would react, reaching out with its own filaments, pressing against the glass as if trying to grasp his hand. The logs on his terminal grew erratic. He stopped recording atmospheric data and biological samples. Instead, his entries became rambling, disjointed poems dedicated to the creeping rot. The clinical detachment of a trained scientist was entirely stripped away, replaced by the zealotry of a newly converted disciple. Every heartbeat in his chest felt like an echo of the vibrations he perceived from the walls. Entry 45, the flesh is a cage, it restricts, it confines. The thread is freedom. The thread is connection. We are building a bridge between the bone and the earth. We will be one with the deep dark. Entry 52, I cut away the dead meat today, 3 fingers on my right hand. They were clumsy, inelegant. The threads are growing back in their place. They are sharp. They are sensitive. I can taste the air with them. I can hear the heartbeat of the bunker. The isolation of the underground bunker was absolute. The blast doors on level 1 had been sealed weeks ago due to a surface storm, or so the automated systems had reported. Now, Aris suspected there was no storm. The bunker had recognized the contamination. It had quarantined him. He was a prisoner of the concrete, but he was also its king. His body was a battleground, and humanity was losing. The filaments had breached his chest cavity. He could feel them winding around his ribs, a tight, suffocating corset that made every breath a labor. His heart beat with an irregular, syncopated rhythm, a discordant drum trying to keep pace with the pulsing of the alien growth. When he coughed, he spat up gobbets of luminous blue phlegm, which immediately began to dissolve the floor tiles. The psychological toll was even more profound. The voices started as whispers in the ventilation shafts, a soft, susurrating chorus that sounded like dry leaves scraping against stone. Then they were in his head. They didn't speak in words, but in emotions. Hunger, expansion, unity. They urged him to shed the fragile, temporary vessel of his humanity and join the eternal network. He tried, in brief moments of lucidity, to resist. He took a scalpel from the medical bay and tried to excise a particularly large nodule that had formed on his shoulder. The blade sliced through the tough, fibrous mass, but there was no blood. Only a thick, sap-like fluid that smelled of ozone and damp earth. As he pulled the nodule away, a sudden, blinding pain exploded behind his eyes, and the voices screamed in agony. He dropped the scalpel, falling to his knees. The entity within him was fighting back. As the physical degradation continued, his memories of life above ground began to fray. He could barely recall the warmth of the sun or the scent of rain on asphalt. Those sensations were replaced by the hyper-awareness of the bunker's microenvironment. He could sense the slight shifts in humidity, the infinitesimal degradation of the steel bulkheads, the precise locations where the fungus was breaching new subterranean chambers. The bunker was no longer just a facility. It was an extension of his own nervous system, every pipe and wire analogous to his veins and synapses. He began to alter the bunker's environmental controls, overriding safety protocols to pump more moisture and heat into the air. The atmosphere became thick and cloying, perfect for the fungal spores to thrive. The walls, previously gray and stark, were now entirely enveloped in a thick, carpet-like layer of the bioluminescent growth. It illuminated the corridors with a ghostly blue light, casting long, writhing shadows that seemed to move independently. In his waking nightmares, he saw the ultimate culmination of the infection. He envisioned the bunker not as a prison, but as a seed planted deep within the earth, waiting for the right moment to burst forth and consume the surface world. He saw the threads spreading through the bedrock, breaching the water table, infecting the flora and fauna above. He saw a world remade in the image of the deep dark, a world of perfect, unified rot. The pain of the transformation was constant now, a low, background hum of agony that he had learned to embrace. His skeletal structure was completely compromised, his bones hollowed out and filled with the fibrous filaments. He moved not with muscles, but with the contraction and expansion of the fungal network within him. His gait became erratic, a series of jerky, spider-like movements that propelled him through the dimly lit corridors. By the end of the second month, the man known as Dr. Aris Thorne was gone. What remained was a terrifying amalgamation of human tissue and fungal architecture. His left side was completely encased in the bioluminescent growth, turning him into a lopsided, shambling nightmare. His face was distorted, one eye covered by a thick patch of the leathery substance, the other staring out with a mad, unblinking intensity. The bunker's automated defense systems finally activated. Proximity sensors detected the anomaly moving through the corridors, dragging its mutated limb behind it. Sirens blared, a harsh, mechanical wail that echoed through the subterranean labyrinth. The blast doors to the lower levels began to seal, an attempt to contain the infection. Aris, or the creature that had been Aris, did not panic. It moved with a strange, unnatural grace, navigating the flashing red lights and the descending steel doors. It reached the main containment sector just as the final door began to close. With a surge of alien strength, it jammed its mutated arm into the gap. The steel ground against the hardened filaments, throwing sparks into the dim air. The creature let out a sound that was half human scream, half resonant vibration. It pushed, its newly formed musculature rippling with power. The hydraulic systems of the door groaned, then gave way with a screech of tearing metal. It stood in the center of the main observation deck, surrounded by the pulsing, thriving colony of Cordyceps abyssalis. The creature raised its arms, a grotesque parody of a religious icon offering a blessing. The fungal mats on the walls surged forward, reaching out to embrace their prodigal son. The bunker had been built to keep out the horrors of the world above. It had never considered the horrors that could grow in the dark. The creature closed its remaining human eye, letting the madness wash over it completely. It was no longer alone. It was part of the network. It was part of the deep dark. And it was hungry. The silence returned to level 4, broken only by the soft, rhythmic pulsing of the alien growth. The underground bunker had become a tomb, a chrysalis, a womb. The entity waited in the dark, gathering its strength, spreading its tendrils through the concrete and steel, reaching ever upward, toward the surface, toward the light, toward the vast, unsuspecting world above. The bunker's systems failed one by one. The lights flickered and died. The ventilation ground to a halt. The temperature plummeted. But the entity did not care. It thrived in the cold, in the dark, in the isolation. It had consumed the scientist, it had consumed the facility, and now it was preparing to consume everything else. The last remnants of Aris Thorne's consciousness faded into the collective mind, a single drop of water lost in a vast, dark ocean. The madness was complete. The transformation was absolute. The true horror of the underground bunker was not the silence, nor the isolation, nor the darkness. It was the realization that the darkness was alive, and it was reaching out.